Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's time! I got around to watching it. It's been getting a bit of a beating from YouTube reviewers, but is it justified? Well, I didn't loathe it, but I didn't like it that much either, and I wouldn't advise going to the cinema to see it, unless it's for a hot date and you don't really intend on watching the movie. Maybe stream it instead at home so you can make a cup of tea if you get bored. The film is 2 hours and 22 minutes long and is mostly action scenes. And spoiler, in this film, Indiana Jones time travels and fights to save the life of one Adolf H of Austria. So if you're curious how, stick around. To cut to the chase, the film was heavy on the fan service and felt very long. There were lots of returning characters from the film series, maybe too many, and yes, the film also takes the very bold choice of having Indiana Jones and company kind of save the leader of the German Reich. You know the one? YouTube will tank the video if I say his full name. I mean, they probably will anyway. But he's like Voldemort to Google Inc, it seems. But you know the fella, he liked lederhosen, tiny moustaches and blonde people, and wasn't too keen on people named Cohen. I'll call him Adolf. Google, what do you want me to do? He comes up in the movie. Offing him is the main bad guy's motivation in the film, so he can take over and win the Second World War for Germany. So by stopping the bad guy, the good guys kind of save your man Adolf, which is a bold narrative choice. Incidentally, you don't get many kids named Adolf anymore, do you? The film is also a bit heavy-handed on the old feminism, and this subtext is getting kind of boring. We come back to Indy as he's getting ready to retire. He's looking aged and frail, his whole family has fallen apart along with his life. He gets a lot of disrespect from the people around him, and that's kind of a theme in these movies. And a young woman comes along to pick up his mantle, and I feel like I've seen all of this before, because this is exactly what they did to Harrison Ford in the Star Wars sequels. So Harrison Ford is back to symbolically represent the patriarchy again. The film tries to meet the formula of earlier Indiana Jones films, with frenetic action sequences and archaeological puzzles, but Harrison Ford's advanced age and physical condition means he just can't do things like he used to, and the feminism is also frankly kind of a problem. Indiana Jones is kind of not even the hero in his own film. There's a new character in the film called Helena Shaw, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and it's kind of her movie. She's at bare minimum a co-star, and she's probably the star in terms of screen time and what she gets to do in the film. It's her, not Indiana Jones, that defeats the lead Nasty, and she saves Indiana Jones. Now, early Indiana Jones films, the good ones, always had a bit of a Bond motif about them, in that it was a handsome, adventurous man and a glamorous leading lady. There was normally a love interest involved. Well, the handsome, adventurous man in the films is now 80 years old, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge isn't exactly bringing the glamour. Why are we collectively pretending to not know things that everybody knows? Straight women like to look at attractive men. Straight men like to look at attractive women. There's a reason James Bond was never cast as a skinny, short guy with bad skin and teeth. It's a fantasy, and part of the fantasy was the romance, and the only romance now involves an octogenarian, or one moment of a somewhat weird English woman leering at a shirtless man. That's fine though, it's okay when women do it, but heaven forbid a woman ever gets objectified. Reverse the genders on this, have a man leering at a shirtless woman and it would not even be in the movie. From here on in, there will be heavy spoilers, okay? Starting now. The film, it involves time travel, okay? I'm not joking, and I wish it didn't, but it did. And for me, time travel and alternate dimensions are the worst episodes of anything. What escort missions are to video games, time travel is to film and TV episodes. Time travel is what series do when they've completely run out of ideas. It's that or crab, people. We start out in a flashback set during the tail end of World War II, and a younger Indiana Jones is trying to steal an artefact from some... how can I put it without YouTube getting its drawers in a bunch? From some Germans wearing distinctive Hugo Boss suits. Do you get it? Their boss is a failed painter. They're very fond of skull motifs and not so fond of Jews. YouTube, if you're going to ban words, do you have to pick such awkward ones? These guys come up a lot, you know. I mean, a lot. They never seem to go out of fashion. They're seemingly most of the programmes on the History Channel. They are, I suppose, the main antagonists of the Indiana Jones franchise. What do you want me to call them? Yatsies? No, I think I'm going to call them nasties. Is that okay to say, YouTube? The nasty Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. There is an extended action sequence in the style of earlier Indiana Jones films. Lots of escaping, running, fighting, but I spent most of it thinking how much I didn't like the CGI de-aged Harrison Ford. There's something consistently off about it. It's like the CGI Princess Leia in Rogue One, but worse. To me, it never looked real or convincingly human. The light and shadow on the model frequently looked off, and during action sequences, his body didn't look like it had any weight. On the train, there are a whole lot of nasties, including one, Dr. Voller, being played by Mads Mikkelsen. He's the main antagonist of the film, and for me, he's by far the best part of it. He normally does good work. I liked him a lot in the series Hannibal, and that's well worth a watch if you can cope with quite a lot of gore. And it also does go very weird in places. Now, Indy's friend, one Dr. Shaw, is being held by the nasties on the train. Indy gets on, fights a lot of the nasties, steals an artefact allegedly made by Archimedes, the Dial of Destiny, or at least part of it. It's split into several pieces, it later transpires. He saves his friend, and during a fight on the roof of the train, Dr. Voller tries to climb up the side of the train, and the train drives him face first into a pole by the trackside, which is a bit much. It's kind of unfeasible that he'd survive it. In the real world, that's usually a recipe for finding yourself minus one head. Indy escapes with his friend and the artefact, and then we fast forward. Indy is now retiring, and none of his students bother to listen to his lecture, and the timing doesn't seem to add up. Indy in the flashback on the train looks maybe 30-something years old, and that was 1945. And we fast forward to his retirement in 1969, so some 24 years have passed, and Indy is now being played by an 80-year-old actor, Harrison Ford, and he's retiring, so that must have been a very hard 24 years. He should look around 54 years old, he's instead 80. Indy is approached by a younger woman, who turns out to be the daughter of Dr. Shaw, Helena. Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, Helena, is wildly inconsistent in her character motivations. She wants to see the dial, so Indy takes her to a storage room to look at it. However, the dial is also being sought by a load of nasties, including the surviving Dr. Voller, who somehow lived through being railroaded face first into a telegraph pole at 50 miles an hour, and he wants the artefact back because he knows what it can do. And Mads Mikkelsen is the best part of the movie for me. He's a great bit of casting as the nasty scientist, and he does it so well, with a bit of Hannibal and a bit of Le Chiffre thrown in there. Indy takes her to a storage room and they look at the artefact, and there's a fight in the storeroom as nasties have come to take it. Helena runs with the artefact, leaving Indy unarmed, locked in a room full of nasty thugs. So they've shown Helena to not care about Indy and to be a thief, willing to use a friend to get what she wants, and Harrison Ford looks really frail in this fight. But he escapes and tracks Helena and the artefact all the way to North Africa, where she's trying to auction it off. So they've written her as someone mostly interested in money. She goes all the way to North Africa from America and chooses to hold an auction to sell off the artefact in a hotel that belongs to a North African gangster who happens to be her ex-fiancé, who she ripped off and ran away from. She chose this hotel for reasons. The auction is crashed by Indy, who wants the artefact back, followed by the nasties, who've tracked them both there, followed by the gangster and his men, who want Helena, and there's a car chase through the city as the nasties try and get away with the dial. As Helena and Indy argue, he's angry at her, stealing from him and leaving him to get killed by nasties, and she's angry at him for stopping her from selling the priceless artefact she stole from him, as well as, quote, she doesn't need morality lessons from an ageing grave robber. At the end, Helena and Indy are left with the artefact, but that's only part of the artefact. Luckily, Helena knows where a clue to another piece of it is, and she wants to go with Indy to get it back. And this raises the question, if she knew where another part of the dial was, why was she selling the part that she had? She tells Indy it was on a shipwreck, a Roman galley filled with centurions. And does the scriptwriter know what a centurion was? A centurion was the commander of a century, originally 100 legionnaires in the Roman army. Why would there be a ship, a galley, full of centurions? Do they just mean legionnaires and got confused? Indy then enlists a Spanish diver friend to help them find the Roman wreck. Helena then leers at and objectifies a shirtless Spaniard on the diving vessel. They dive, get a tablet with clues on it to find the rest of the artefact, come back up and get captured by the nasties again who boarded their ship while they were underwater. They escape again when Helena distracts the nasties with some dynamite and follow the clue to Sicily where the rest of the artefact is and lead the nasties right to it. There's another fight and Indy's wounded and captured again, and the nasties have the completed artefact, and for some reason Helena now wants to save him more than anything. She became selfless and heroic out of nowhere round about the time she saw that guy with his shirt off. She seems to have had a come to Jesus moment while looking at his manly chest, and her whole personality and motivations changed. She now really cares about Indy, doesn't care much about the artefact or the money she could sell it for. The completed artefact can be used to time travel, and Dr. Voller wants to use it to go back to 1939, assassinate Adolf and take over the German Reich for himself and win the Second World War. He gets on a plane and heads for a nearby storm, which is used as a portal for the time travel, and while the plane is taking off, Helena gets on by catching it on a motorbike and climbing onto the landing gear before it ascends. Only while on the plane, Indy tells Dr. Voller that his calculations are off, due to continental drift. Continental drift, he says, over 2,000 years. Now, continental drift apparently occurs at around 1.5 centimetres a year, so 2,000 years is around 3,000 centimetres, and at 100 centimetres per metre that would mean a difference of 30 metres. This, according to the plot of this film, is enough to throw off the calculation by Dr. Voller. So instead of going back to 1939, the plane goes back to 213 BC. The Romans, for some reason, start shooting at the flying plane with their ballistas. They bullseye a moving plane multiple times. The nasties then open fire from the side of the planes at the Romans. Helena opens the bomb bay doors, dumping most of the nasties out into the sea, and uses a pistol on Dr. Voller. Helena and Indy then meet Archimedes after they parachute out of the plane. Indy wants to stay and see some real history firsthand, so Helena knocks him out and takes him back anyway. And somehow off camera she gets them all back to 1969, where Indy is reunited with Marion and taken back to America, all without and strictly against his consent. Feminism, it seems, really isn't too hot on male consent. She-Hulk was much the same. That seems to be a worryingly good chunk of feminism now, beating men up and removing their consent. And that is where the film gets left. So what is the sum total of the effect of this story? They stopped Dr. Voller and saved the life of Adolf, the leader of the nasty party. They just had Indiana Jones and company fight to ensure the Holocaust still happened. Nobody even mentioned that they had a time travel device. They could technically go back and try to stop Adolf. They could prevent the Second World War, prevent all that horrible loss of life, prevent the Holocaust. Maybe someone could have objected and worried about changing the timeline. Disney, are you all okay over there? Who greenlit this idea? You just had Indiana Jones and crew save Adolf, and then they just left it at that. To preserve the timeline where 6 million Jews died. That's the last act of Indiana Jones now. That's how they closed out his story.
Those look good. A big salty clam would sure go great with this heat. Maybe it's time we set a little trap for Crystal Cove's knob stealer.